Hey YouTube, what's up? Dr. T here in St. Petersburg, Florida. So let's move on to part 2 of my new series and topic that I'm covering on Bitcoin.
You know, Bitcoin has been widely used by a website called Silk Road, which allows pretty much everything to be bought and sold. Some of the products on there are made illegal by various governments, yet it trades on there. You know, I don't do drugs, I don't even drink caffeine or alcohol, so it's just nothing that personally I'm interested in. But what I am interested in is looking at the ability of the market to solve these problems, because these particular market actors, they were excluded from traditional banking systems, and Silk Road and Bitcoin have provided a solution to that. But we see other market actors which have also been excluded for different reasons. For example, WikiLeaks, they're engaged in political speech, and the banks and MasterCard, they've terminated service. We have the IRS targeting political opponents for political speech. And people wonder why they might want to have anonymity. It's very difficult to exercise your speech if you don't have the ability to transact. And so what we're seeing with Bitcoin is money has literally become speech.
There are lots of people interested in Bitcoin for different reasons, and they have lots of different opinions on different things, and they argue with each other all the time. And yes, some people believe that things like Silk Road are terrible for Bitcoin. Other people think that that's the killer app, and that's why it has all of its value in the first place. Bitcoin needs to be understood as a tool, and a useful tool is used by everyone who finds it useful. So just as bad people use the cell phone in the car, bad people are going to use Bitcoin, and people shouldn't fear that or worry about that.
Now, the trouble with both of those groups of people is that they're just not that large. There aren't that many people who are passionate enough about their politics that they will adopt a new currency. And there aren't that many people breaking the law, in wholesale ways. But it's this transition to the third characteristic that's really interesting. Because zero transaction cost has an appeal to everybody. Everybody would like to save money on transaction costs. It just takes costs out of the system. And because of that, it has much, much broader appeal. But what's interesting is that, and that's why I'm interested, right? That's why I'm interested in. I think that, you've got an opportunity to revolutionize financial services. Tens of billions, hundreds of billions of market cap at risk. If that comes under pressure, then it's like squeezing a balloon. Market value has to be created somewhere else, ideally in these new companies.
Coinbase, generally speaking, our goal is to make it easy for the average consumer and the average merchant to use Bitcoin. I think sort of the litmus test for all this is, can I feasibly present this to someone who hasn't seen it before, even my mom, and can she reasonably use it? That's sort of what we're trying to build towards.
So whenever you get a new technology, there's always these predictable waves of companies. And the first wave is building the infrastructure that just makes the damn thing work, right? And right now, just to make Bitcoin work at all, you need exchanges to get money into Bitcoin. You need wallets to hold the Bitcoin, and you need payment processors to be able to spend the Bitcoin. So that's that infrastructure level. That's where we are today.
You think about the average business that's accepting PayPal or credit card on the internet, they're paying roughly 2.7% to do that. And just even chopping that down to what a company like Coinbase offers at the moment, 1% costs is a significant cost saving. Let's say you're a 5% margin business. All of a sudden, if you're saving 2% on credit card processing costs, that's 40% to your bottom line, which is very non-negligible. Add in other things like a case like microtransactions, where maybe there's a prohibitive 20-cent base fee on a credit card. All of a sudden, you can now have a business model where it's pay 5 cents to read the rest of this article.
So the biggest opportunity that I see right now is microtransactions. So if I want to pay somebody 5 cents online today, it's not possible. Because in a card not present transaction, if I'm trying to use my credit card, which I'm inevitably doing online, there's no other way, I can't pay cash, can't jam it into the computer, there's a minimum of a 30% charge plus 2% of the transaction. So if I'm trying to charge you 5 cents and it's going to cost me 30 cents to do it, I can't do it. So if you remember the earthquake in Haiti a little while ago, Red Cross had this great campaign. You could text to send $1. That was a one-off thing. You haven't seen that again. And the reason was because in that one instance, everybody waived their fees. But in general, you have the same problem. If you want to send somebody $1, donate $1 to a charity, 30-something cents of that is going to go just to the payment processing, which means only 70% of your donation actually goes to the charity that you intended to give it to. That's not a very good way to do things. With Bitcoin, because the transaction costs go to zero, because there are no minimums, you can have people giving $1, $2, 25 cents, and all of that money will go to the charity. So there are lots of these use cases that can become these vertical applications that sit on top of the infrastructure, and that's how new technologies emerge in financial services.
In the Bitcoin community, there's a bit of a tension between people who pine for the good old days of Bitcoin kind of being the bad boy of currency, to people who think that we need to grow up and engage with regulators and banks and the traditional finance system more.
Bitcoin definitely needs to shy away and move away from a lot of the original use cases that I think the media likes to tout, i.e. drugs or whatever else it may be. And for it to really flourish, the average sort of business needs to realize the great payment efficiencies that Bitcoin can bring. And ultimately, when a day of reckoning comes in Washington, where somebody has done something bad with Bitcoin, I think it's going to be our job as a community to sort of pull on this pool of goodwill that's been built in all these businesses who are now saving, say, 2% on their bottom line, maybe in a much larger percentage as a percentage of their net profit, and say, hey, we need Bitcoin to survive. This is actually creating real economic good.
So I think for Bitcoin to become really big and for venture capitalists to start to invest, we have to believe that companies are going to embrace the regulation and accept it and comply with it. That's going to mean that anonymity is going to have to go, at least for transactions over a certain size, that there's likely to be some level of centralization, or at least these trusted counterparties emerging.
So I know we have a very strong libertarian base in the Bitcoin community right now, and they're very ideologically driven. But as VCs come in and invest and bigger companies grow up, you're going to see that fade. And I think that's good because, it's not an accessible worldview for most people. And it's really not the most transformative part. The most transformative part of Bitcoin is the economic liberty it gives to people around the world.
VCs are not the only source of capital, especially in the Bitcoin market. You have lots of people with lots of money who have very well-aligned objectives with Bitcoin. And they can fund whatever they wish.
I would say that in order for Bitcoin to go mainstream, regulation is necessary, because in order for the average consumer to feasibly feel like they can use it, they want to feel safe in some way. And part of that is understanding Bitcoin. Part of it is around federal entities. Not necessarily that Bitcoin needs a federal entity to become legitimate, but it certainly provides that sort of additional stamp of approval that would get people more comfortable with it.
In America, you got to live by American regulation, or whatever jurisdiction you happen to live in. And so what we're seeing is a set of entrepreneurs who are just saying, well, look, if those are the ground rules, then we will comply with them, because the opportunity that we create by compliance is sufficiently big that the costs of compliance are worth it. And we're not actually giving up that much. Because you know what? If you guys over at FinCEN want to stop money laundering, you know what? I'm not going to make money out of money laundering. That's not my objective. I want to make money out of a whole set of legitimate use cases which are far, far bigger. And so in each case, if you can understand the objective of the regulator and you can then comply, there may be some additional costs involved, there may be some additional time involved, but it allows you to go after a much, much bigger market.
Anything that has to do with money, the United States government is going to try to regulate it. You can't ask a lion not to tear up its prey. That's what the United States government does to the consumer, to the citizen, to the human being, is, literally steal and tear from it. So it's inevitable that, they're going to try to regulate Bitcoin.
I think it is false to believe that the winners in the Bitcoin economy are going to be based in America. And the reason is that America has one of the most oppressive financial regulatory schemes of much of the world. And so trying to run a financial company when other people can move their businesses to more hospitable jurisdictions, and because Bitcoin works all over the world, so a company can set up anywhere and service its customers in any other part of the world, a company would be hamstringing itself to set up in the U.S. Now, indeed, a lot of them do and are, because it's easier to raise venture capital in the beginning stages. But those companies are going to run into heavy problems when the government starts to realize that Bitcoin is actually an existential threat to its own money, and it's not going to put up with people in its own borders, perpetuating that.
I tend to be on the side of the people who think that we need to engage, with banks and regulators and traditional systems. Maybe I'm a little more conservative, but I think there's a lot we can learn from kind of the traditional money system. I think there's a lot they can learn from us also, but there's hundreds of years of experience of banks keeping people's money safe, and I think that's really important for Bitcoin.
Consumers will be able to go to a business and say, like, yep, okay, it's like accredited by a Bitcoin Foundation, like it matches certain like standards for our industry, and yes, their licenses are in order, and therefore I don't worry about Homeland Security seizing all the funds in these accounts. Like, I'm happy. So consumers will like that. Most consumers, not old-time crypto anarchists, they will hate that and they'll do their own thing, and that's totally fine. But the vast bulk of people who use these businesses will benefit from that.
The community that has brought Bitcoin from nothing to where it is today has a different set of ideals than the people who are starting to come into Bitcoin now and saying, well, to take it to the mainstream, this is what's going to be needed. And so you're seeing some clash of ideas and some clash of ideals.
People with money tend to want to protect their money, and the biggest danger to many people's money is that the government will seize it. Why would the government seize it? If it believes that you've done something against its wishes. So it's no surprise that venture capital companies and wealthy people tend to, at least on the surface, be very pro-regulation, because they do not want to engender harm by becoming a target of the government.
I'm pro-regulation. I think it's an opportunity. So I have investors who invest only in pre-regulated financial companies, and they've built them themselves. And part of the playbook is get regulated in a good way, in a way that's good for everyone, that's good for the space. So yeah, no, like, should wallet providers be able to act functionally as banks without any oversight or regulation? No, they should not. Now, fundamental to Bitcoin is, like, if you want to choose to do that, fine. No one will be able to stop you at a small scale. And if individuals want to choose to put their money with whomever they want, that's great. I don't mind that. But when you have, but we can't have like large scale poor business practices that could impact the whole community. I'm not into that. And I think regulation is part of that story.
People they're saying this is a real future. So that instinct that they have to want to do something that ridiculous as regulate the currency suggests that people know that this is here to stay and that there's big money. But as in people, there's been a lot of debate about this among anarchists, and I see this debating this back and forth yesterday on Twitter, is that one of the points of Bitcoin is that it's not regulated, it's not centralized, and it can be completely anonymous. You don't have to, people don't have to know what you're doing in your most intimate areas of your life if you can use Bitcoin. The regulation that a lot of these people are welcoming, of course, it's going to dampen a lot of the enthusiasm about Bitcoin and could potentially hurt it.
Coming from this with personal sentiments as a crypto anarchist, Bitcoin's just amazingly awesome because it massively changes the rules of the game. Anyone can send any amount of money to anyone, anywhere, at any time. Can't be seized or confiscated or frozen in any way. But I also realize that no great amount of wealth is going to be created except with the permission of the government. And along that role, as an investor, venture capitalist type, I have a fiduciary duty. And so, as a result, I want to know the rules that my investments and the founders of those companies need to play by. Because now I know that my founder can act in a certain way and he's not going to end up in jail, and the investment's not going to get seized in the company, and that's not going to hurt my investment. So it is kind of paradoxical in a way, but I think overall it's going to help legitimize Bitcoin and bring it into much more mainstream transactions.